Hello, I am Pigeon or Xander or whatever you want to call me, and today we're going to be talking about bald people. That's an ad hominem. Shut the fuck up, you geek. So who is this lovely bald fellow that I'm going to be talking about today? Why, it's none other than everyone's favorite streamer leech, Hutch. Now, if you don't know who Hutch is, I think the best way to get introduced to him is just to show you a quick glance at his YouTube page. Now keep in mind, this guy is a liberal. He is supposedly progressive and against fascistic leadership and all things conservative. And this is what his YouTube page looks like. Out of the 32 videos he's made in the last 2 months, 24 of them have been about criticizing leftists or people on the progressive left. And out of those 24, 11 have been about Hassan and Ethan Klein. Now, I'm not against infighting, as you can see by the time that I did it, but I will say, maybe it says something about your politics when you spend this much time criticizing people that are supposedly pushing for mostly what you align with. I mean, this man was so eager to destroy leftists that he was just watching Hassan during the LA protests and then proceeded to not only gas up the LAPD, but then proceeded to immediately be proven wrong.
That's kind of what it feels like.
Okay, all right.
If that makes sense.
Makes sense. I just think is it. I mean, listen, is it not kind of comical that he's been given this commentary about like, oh yeah, that's standard issue weaponry. That's usually a surefire sign that things are about to pop off, and he's been doing that for like an hour. And so far, it seems like the police are showing restraint. Like they're not advancing. They issued a dispersal order, and they haven't advanced. Oh yeah, no, they use that technology in Colombia. To, oh, okay. Oh, fuck me, right?
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry, I get so excited to talk about this freak. So let's talk about the paragon of genius that is Hutch. I think maybe the best way to get a glimpse into the inner workings of this Black Ops creator turned political pundit is to look at a video entitled Debating Violent versus Nonviolent Protest. The title is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to explain it anyways. A random conglomerate of the Snow Patrol, including Hutch, decided to sit down and discuss what we should be doing in the face of fascistic legislation and how to properly protest. These people understand that the government is chucking out anyone that may have a slightly ethnic last name, but thankfully the Brain Trust has gathered to discuss the ethics of throwing a brick at a cop. I don't think the name of the other speakers and debaters is really that important to my point here, but for clarity's sake, I will go over their names other than Humpty Dumpty in the top right. We have Staxiums, white guy with glasses. We have Rudy, aka white guy with glasses. We have Charlie, not white guy with glasses. And then we have the host, Wick TV, also white guy with glasses. That fact isn't extremely relevant, but I do think it's funny that 4 out of the 5 people can be distinguished by the shape of their glasses and how much hair they have. I think cars should be louder, actually. That's fucking awesome. I think trucks should make more noise. Why would I want to live in a place that's quiet ever? Anyways, this is a video about Hutch, so let's look at his initial abstract and stance on violent and nonviolent protest.
I do want to focus the crux of the arguments that I'm going to make during this conversation on just practical considerations. I do want to see a successful opposition movement spring up and inhibit Donald Trump politically. I do want to see this movement lead to sustained wins in special elections and the midterm elections. And to that end, I think the movement needs to be explicitly rooted in nonviolence. I don't know how much time we should spend condemning violence, but I do think that there needs to be a definitional sort of establishment of what this movement is and it has to be seen as nonviolent if we want the movement to be successful.
In all honesty, this is a fine enough opinion on its own. If you saw nothing else of his stances, you would probably assume that he aligns himself more with a MLK-esque type of philosophy. I am, of course, not saying that Hutch is similar to MLK in any way, but that's just the easiest analogy that I can give that you guys would probably understand. He seems to want nonviolence, but not because he doesn't understand that violent resistance is inherently retaliatory towards far harsher systemic violence, but rather he just thinks that nonviolence is the best way to broaden sympathies among the general public and actually result in change. And while he may not like violence, spending excessive time constantly condemning violence and criticizing violent actors seems like something he is not really interested in. That is about as charitable as I can be, so hopefully he says nothing that makes me feel like the charitable view is not the correct one.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
So keep in mind, this is supposed to be his general stance for the debate and how he views resistance. Personally, generally speaking, I disagree with an only nonviolent approach. I don't mind people that preach purely nonviolence too much, but I think for large-scale revolution, you're going to have some sort of violent revolution or change. Now, that doesn't always mean that violence is like true violence, right? We're not talking about going out there and beating random people with sticks. It could be blockades, property damage. I mean, sometimes even civil disobedience has been called violence. But in my opinion, change cannot really happen unless the state is vehemently uncomfortable with the way you are protesting. To that end, the state is going to commonly label you as violent, even if on a day-to-day basis, me and you may understand that, I don't know, burning down a Waymo isn't really violent. I don't really give a fuck. This leads us to the first sus response from Hutch regarding the efficacy of nonviolence and violent protest. He references a book by Erica Chenoweth entitled Why Civil Resistance Works, Nonviolence in the Past and Future. Or, as he so eloquently puts it, a book that's going viral on TikTok. I'm not going to go over the book itself too much because I think that would deviate too much from the main point. And this video isn't about Erica Chenoweth. But Hutch is claiming that this book is some sort of empirical evidence that nonviolence works more often than violence.
Because we actually do have some empirical things that we can point to evaluate the effectiveness of nonviolent versus violent protests. There's an author named Erica Chenoweth, and I guess a book that she wrote in 2011 is starting to go viral on TikTok now. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't really know. But the premise was that if no authoritarian regime in the last 100 years ever survived when at least 3.5% of the population engaged in nonviolent protest. And she analyzed hundreds, I think over 300 resistance movements. These were not like civil rights struggles. We're talking about like going up against authoritarian regimes. And what she found was that for the movements that were rooted in nonviolence, they had a little over 50% chance of succeeding. It was something like 52%. And the ones that did violent resistance, it was about half that. It was about a quarter.
I don't agree with a lot of the assertions that this book makes, but I'm mainly annoyed at the fact that Hutch decides to call to this as if it's some sort of authority on the matter. Political science and analysis are, of course, important in many aspects. But Hutch, he just doesn't qualify any of the things that they qualify in the book. For one, the book only looks at movements from 1900 to 2006. He doesn't mention that many of the movements that were considered violent at the time would now be retroactively considered nonviolent by us. And he, of course, does not mention that we are in an era where more information is being spread than we have ever imagined. Violent resistance is far more sympathetic when people are constantly being bombarded with independent journalism and video cameras. It's a lot easier for people to be sympathetic for someone throwing a rock at a cop if they see the cop being a dick 2 seconds before that because some random person on Twitter uploaded it. The book also seems to see things as purely black and white without acknowledging that violence and nonviolence can exist within the same movement, thus attributing all of the success to nonviolence while saying that violence does nothing. Now, my criticisms of this book are by no means a giant gaping hole in Hutch's worldview so far, but I do think it is important to acknowledge that this means fucking nothing. Another person that, fair enough, did put research into the topic, just agreed with him that they think that nonviolence is more effective than violence because they labeled essentially every effective movement over the past century as nonviolent. That's not exactly empirical, nor is it unquestionable. It's just a single person's opinion. Believe it or not, putting something into a percentage form and saying it's empirical and using stats doesn't mean jack shit when we are talking about over 100 years of different contexts and definitions of what is and is not violence. There are plenty of political scientists and analysts that would disagree with Erica Chenoweth, and she is by no means the only person nor a specific authority that you should turn to. Now, to Hutch's credit, he does do some awesome fence sitting where he says that he's not always against political violence, and then he uses the example of the American Revolution.
Which is also not to say that you should never do political violence, because I don't know if anybody actually believes that in a country that was born out of a violent revolution.
The classic, you can be violent over attacks on tea bags, but if another country is starving your children to death, you just kind of got to sit there. Now, obviously, I am alluding to his opinions on Gaza, but we will get to that later. Quick sidebar, dude's hitting a vape in the middle of the debate. Fucking hell yeah, brother. Rock on, man. Hit those 360 no-scopes and then make it home in time to yell at protesters. Also, second sidebar, this guy pisses me off. A very condescending guy that gets angry anytime Rudy and Charlie disagree with him. He gets very red when he can't speak for 3 hours straight in a discussion with 4 other people. All right, sorry, I'll get back on topic now. So as far as we've seen, Hutch has not really done anything too much other than dismiss the actions of violent actors within large movements. And while I may find that kind of annoying and reductive and not nuanced when looking at, you know, a century of political movements, it's not that big of a deal, and it's far from a bootlicker. Am I simply a deranged leftist that's trying to lick the clout steam that permeates off the squeaky clean dome of a man with 840,000 subscribers, but only 10K views under basically every video? No, I'm not. Let's see how Hutch begins to describe his experience at the most lived-up protest since Hillary ran, the No Kings protest. I know I just made fun of them. The No Kings protests were fine. They were cool. I'm glad a lot of people went to those. But Hutch first starts off by describing how he felt way more comfortable going to this event because the, organizers said it was explicitly nonviolent.
But because the event was explicitly marketed as a non-violent event, I personally did not feel like there was basically any risk to me. Like, I was not concerned about the violence. People were there with their kids.
Awesome, man. That's great. I'm glad you felt comfy. People were protesting ICE, but thank God this guy was able to feel comfy. Anyways, he begins to talk about his interactions with the cops and how the protesters had actually a direct effect on that.
But it's important to identify that there are different elements within a protest. So like, I walked around, it was like a 3 square block, or there was like a limited radius, like a 1 square mile radius where the protests were going. Some people were at City Hall, some people were over here, and then some people were outside of this federal building where Marines were posted. Now, everywhere else in the protest, it was music, dancing, smiles, funny signs. It was just completely good vibes. There was just no tension in the air. There was no violence with the cops. In fact, all the cops who were posted up were super friendly. You could have walked up to them, asked them how their day was. They would have engaged in conversation with you. These people were obviously not like Gestapo, like itching to get in there and just crack some heads. The pocket of space where the violence did break out was at the federal building where the Marines were posted up. There, it had attracted a younger kind of element, a more angry kind of element, and obviously like explicitly more kind of leftist element, you could tell. And these were people that were very obviously if not inviting conflict with police, they were there like fully prepared for it. I mean, you could just tell it was a totally different vibe. And the crowd kept getting closer and closer and closer to the Marines. Eventually, they started throwing objects. There was a dispersal order that was given. People didn't disperse. And at that point, they chucked in tear gas. Now, I don't really know if I can call that unjustified. Would you guys say that that's unjustified for them to clear that space?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. First off, he says that the cops were super nice and that the protesters were just dancing and had funny signs. Awesome, man. That's so fucking cool. Like, what am I supposed to glean from that? That the cops didn't open fire on some dancing children? Someone get these guys a medal, please. But then he proceeds to describe the evil leftist part of the protests, where they were even throwing stuff at Marines. And I tell you what, guys, I know that we're protesting fascism, and Hutch agrees that we are becoming fascist, but throwing stuff at Marines, guys, seriously? Were you throwing rocks at a cop? Yeah, that's it. I'm no longer a leftist. Pigeon is no longer a leftist. I hate Zoran Mamdani. I'm BFFs with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Joe Biden now. Sorry. I have an immediate argument as to why, as Hutch calls it, dispersal is unwarranted in this instance. But to my surprise, one of the panelists actually brought it up.
The Marines were tear gassing. It wasn't the LAPD.
No, the LA County Sheriff, I think, came in at some point. That they were the ones who came in on horseback and cleared the.
I don't think that the Marines are even allowed to be here. I think there's a huge legal issue that we're having right now with like whether or not the National Guard of Marines are even here like lawfully. So
Sure,
anything that they do
that's not the question, though.
Going to be real
yeah,
bad.
I feel like you're dodging the question. Could you let's just say it was the cops then.
No, I don't think that. No, I think that people have the right to protest.
I want to thank Charlie and Rudy for being in this debate because, oh my God, they're the only ones that made this entire thing bearable. So I don't think I could get through this without you guys. Thank you. I don't even know who they were before the debate, but, you know, here's their socials if I could find it. Now, Hutch and his goblin pet try to hand wave this away and act as if Charlie is dodging the question, but this is unironically one of the best points made in the entire debate. The people that Hutch perceived as unruly are directly protesting the militarization of our country. And supposedly, that is what Hutch is protesting as well. So throwing things at Marines, not local police, Marines that are being deployed is a direct protest of that militarization, because they are bringing literal factions of the army to try and quell the protests. This, of course, means that tear gassing the protesters makes no sense because the Marines shouldn't have fucking been there to begin with. And here is where we get to see the classic Hutch government apologia. I've been building up to this a little bit, but what have you noticed about the arguments that Hutch has made so far that aren't extremely egregious? They're all extremely vague. You see, when he says his stances, he's refusing to define what he thinks violence is when he says those stances. He points to a book that goes over 100 years of protests and movements and organizations without actually pointing to a single moment in history, because he likes to say all the correct words when saying those words is easy and doesn't challenge the status quo. You can say you don't want to spend much time condemning violent protest, yet here's a 3.5-hour-long debate where you are doing just that. It's easy to say you support a general cause. It's a lot harder for Hutch to actually say he supports something when it gets more specific. As we move on, I will say, pay attention to the way Hutch says things and the connotations that he puts forward. As with many political creators, he does not make explicit claims that you can easily address. He cannot say that he is against the cause in so many words, but rather what he can do is paint a picture subtly about how any type of resistance is not okay. The Marines aren't to blame for their part in the suppression of free speech, nor their part in the militarization of our country, but rather the protesters were inviting conflict.
These were people that were very obviously if not inviting conflict with police, they were there like fully prepared for it. I mean, you could just tell it was a totally different vibe.
Guess they should have danced and wrote funny signs, huh, Hutch? Everyone knows that's how every great political movement was ever successful. It was MLK famously Dougie'd. And they said, segregation? Can't do it. Rosa Parks famously wrote a sign that said, if segregation didn't exist, we'd be at brunch right now. I'm gonna wear my Keep Calm and Bernie On shirt to the No Kings protest. That'll show the state who's boss. What's insane to me too is that people will look at Hutch and be like, oh yeah, he's a general ally of left-leaning politics. The man uses leftist like it's a fucking slur. Hutch directly states that the reason he is at these protests is for completely different reasons than the leftists.
I'm trying to set the premise here that the people I'm speaking about, the ones that are here about like radical ideology, they are not like our flank. They're not even a part of the movement. They're an outside group that have their own agenda that people like me and probably 99% of the people that were at the protest, they want nothing to do with that. So I have no idea how you could make the case. You're just kind of vaguely pointing to literature, but I don't know how you can make the case that having like a small group of agitators benefits me at all when my purpose as a part of some movement is to be explicitly rooted in nonviolence.
This guy said that he was protesting in order to gain more electoral votes for the Democrats.
Could I ask like what your purpose was yesterday? So I imagine you live in Los Angeles or close to it. So protesting ICE is not something that you were there for. What were you there for specifically?
The point of the protest yesterday was just no kings, just kind of fighting against Trump's authoritarianism, but it was also like obviously very much steeped in the ICE stuff as well. It affected our community directly. But I mean, to answer your question broadly, the purpose that I would like to see in terms of a large, collective, organized, disciplined movement is electoral victories, like garnering support for the cause, getting people to become engaged in the political process so that we can win elections, take their majority in 2026, and then hopefully get a trifecta in 2028.
Have you ever heard of a less politically savvy take than that? That's the equivalent of being like, yeah, I'm all for Black Lives Matter. Here, look at this I voted sticker. The people throwing rocks at Marines weren't protesting Trump's authoritarianism, but you talking to a cop and doing some funny dances was. No fucking wonder people think that Democrats and liberals are exaggerating the issues of the government, because in one breath, you'll say that the government is authoritarian and fascistic, and then in the next breath, you'll say that the answer is to just shake your head as children get dragged to cages. Give me a break, Hutch. You want to secure electoral college votes because at the end of the day, you would not give a fuck if a Democrat was doing this. You're not an advocate for harm reduction. You're an advocate for change as long as it's comfortable. You want to pat yourself on the back while you girl boss your way to another $1 billion to Israel, huh? Well, if you're thinking, Pigeon, that's a pretty uncharitable view, man. He didn't say all that. I mean, look, he even said that he's okay with civil disobedience. Here's him saying that he's not okay with people blocking traffic.
I don't know about, like, obviously there's some element of disruption that can be valid. But in the case of like, I'm not really sure I understand the tactical value of like blocking off a freeway. When, you know, the majority of people that you're preventing from like going home in a freeway in a city like Los Angeles, where there's 10 million people, if you block a freeway, the consequences are actually we're talking about disruption on a scale that is like, it could be very, very, very bad. And for what? Like, what are the goals with that? Like, when people see that, they just get pissed off.
What the fuck are you talking about, Hutch? What do you think civil disobedience is? Blocking traffic and sit-ins were meant to directly disrupt your everyday life. What the fuck do you think the point of protesting is? Do you think a protest is supposed to just make life easy for everybody? Guys, the optics of breaking the law and annoying people is just too much. When Gandhi did the Salt March, he should have just held up a funny sign and just kind of like sat in the corner. That would have been way more effective. I'm losing my fucking mind. Now, he makes the point later on that he is more okay with this disruption if it is directly related to the way in which we are being oppressed. That's not a horrible point if we are protesting like I don't know, specifically like a single building. But we are talking about protesting an entire government. In what way would you protest a government that would not inconvenience the general populace? Within the civil rights era, segregation was so widespread that there was sit-ins nationwide. Are you seriously trying to tell me that the general populace didn't feel annoyed or disrupted by that? Of fucking course they did. That is quite literally how a protest works and how political action works. But Hutch doesn't want a protest, he wants a block party with some Harris flags. In fact, Hutch directly says that the people that commit property damage are not a part of the No Kings protests, and he would not want to be a part of a movement with those kinds of people.
But the protest that was organized yesterday all across the country was explicitly nonviolent. And you could see plenty of examples all over the country of event organizers that were stepping in to sort of curb people's instincts and to sort of like push them out if they were doing that kind of stuff. So definitionally, like the people that came in and actually did agitate, like Seattle got pretty bad, they're actually not a part of this movement. And quite frankly, I don't want any part of their ideology. Like they are looking for revolution. It has nothing to do with the No Kings event.
Later on in the debate, they get to some more concrete examples. And Rudy asks him this question.
We're talking about political violence and kind of strategic tactical things. And I know you've already said you don't want anything to do with the anarchist side. That's fine. They probably don't want anything to do with you.
They don't.
So it's probably a mutual feeling.
Yeah.
So we're good on that front. So let's say you, Hutch, using your platform, you're spending all your energy for the next couple of years mobilizing, you're going out, you're getting the normies, you're helping with that. Would you be opposed to an anarchist doing a very strategic and targeted tactic to divert, like say they did a choke point on like an ice station, or they diverted energy or did something to really target something in a specific manner? Would, even if you don't avow it, would that be too far for you if it was strategic and targeted?
I would in that instance, I would not support that, because okay, what are you going to do? You're going to create a choke point for what? Like a couple hours? Like they will come in and push you out, and it will ultimately be unsuccessful. And so again, it just, when you confront that reality of like, this is just not going to work. Like if we try to physically engage with the state in this way, we're just not going to be successful. And so what are the risks? Jail time, felonies, and then what are the benefits? Literally none. And so then you have to go to, okay, well, what can we do? And then you get to this very practical answer of like working within the institutions, working within the system itself to create political pressure.
This guy supports nothing. He doesn't even support targeted property damage. Genuinely, what do you even support then? This is a man that believes that nonviolent protest and incremental change is important, but also that violent resistance does not matter unless it fully flips everything on its head immediately. And once again, when I'm saying violent protest, I'm not talking about beating civilians or whatever the fuck. We're talking about targeted property damage. Property damage of people that are directly involved in what you don't like. Whatever, man. All right, before I continue, I have to say something about this guy, Staxiums. I made fun of him earlier, and I still don't really like him, to be honest. He has horrendous vibes, especially at the beginning of the debate. But he is absolutely more reasonable than Hutch, and I would feel kind of bad if people assumed that he disagreed with everything Hutch says. Based off this debate, they clearly have some important distinctions in their worldviews, so hopefully that covers my ass. I still think a lot of his opinions suck, but less so than Hutch, and this video isn't about him. So let's continue making fun of Hutch. Unfortunately, the rest of the debate is pretty uneventful. They opened the panel to several more people, one of whom is a TERF, but I'm going to steer away from that specific debate because I don't really think there's much else to say there. You can watch the rest of the debate if you want, but as someone that did, I recommend you don't. It was one of the biggest wastes of my time in recent memory. Yellow diamonds look like PP. All right, so we've gone over what Hutch thinks about domestic protesting and what he thinks it can and should look like. But let's take a look at a place that he feels maybe a little bit less connected to. If you have been somehow living under a rock for the last 2 years, allow me to quickly explain what's happening in the Middle East. For roughly the last 20 months, Israel has been committing unconscionable amounts of atrocities on Palestine and enacting a genuine genocide on the Palestinians. There's ample evidence of them killing and hurting civilians under the guise of going after terrorists and bad faith actors. But as time has gone on, it has become even more so obvious that Israel is not really worried about defending civilians from violence. And even before Israel's most recent horrible actions of blocking off all aid into the Gaza Strip and the death toll constantly rising from constant bombings, 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinians as of December 15th, 2023. Doctors and nurses within the area have talked extensively about how they have never seen so many children with sniper bullets in their heads. And there are constant videos of IDF soldiers raping and killing Palestinians and then demolishing their homes, all while laughing. And my evidence is not simply anecdotal or looking at civilian death tolls and automatically assuming malice. No, the UN itself has designated this as consistent with the actions of a genocide. And this is all happening under America's funding. So after hearing all that, assuming that you didn't hear that before, or you don't know what's happening, what do you think the proper response to a genocide is? Perhaps your beliefs are that of a truly violent resistance, and that in the face of a genocide, there's really no other choice but armed resistance. And honestly, yeah, I agree with that. I don't really think there's a way to peacefully protest a genocide. But maybe you're thinking that a purely violent approach when it comes to harming people is counterproductive, and in order to hurt a more powerful country, strategic political actions such as blockades are required in order to make a much larger and more powerful country back down. And I would also say that's a very fair assessment, and I would agree that that is a good action to take, and we should look at political strategic options instead of just simply fighting a war that you will probably lose. Also, I said war. The Palestinians are being genocided, but if the armed resistors are fighting a war, if that makes sense, but that kind of assumes that they're equal. You get what I'm saying. It's a genocide, not a war, but you know. Point is, blockades are a good thing. What do you think Hutch's opinions on blockades are? For context, the Houthis, who you may also know as Ansar Allah, are a military organization within Yemen. Certain countries, including the US, have designated them as a terrorist organization, and I'm not really interested in going over every single action that the Houthis have ever taken. But one of their most prominent actions when it comes to the genocide within Palestine is known as the Red Sea Crisis. The Red Sea Crisis was a major blockade within the Red Sea to try and pressure Israel. The demands from the Houthis was for Israel to stop their invasion of the West Bank and to stop genociding the Palestinians. Now, as blockades go, some ships that were going through the area were captured and held hostage. Hi, it's Future Xander here. I was editing and realized that I felt that my position was not as clarified as I wanted it to be, so I'm adding this addendum on, so that way you guys understand my full position. For one, it's important to recognize that yes, not all of the ships were just captured. There were a few sunk. From what I can tell, the death toll from the Red Sea is 8 people. And that's not nothing, you know, that is worth acknowledging. The reason I didn't initially say it is because I felt it was kind of a moot point. Sorry, there's a cat down here. And I still kind of feel that way. I don't want you guys to feel like I'm withholding information from you. 8 deaths is not nothing. And I'm never pro civilians dying. That's not my position. But with all that being said, the Palestinians currently are undergoing and feeling the effects of cruelty that is borderline unmatched in recent history, with the only comparisons being that of things like the Holocaust, you know? And while I'm not saying that these 8 civilian deaths are nothing, I would never in a million years ever think that my support for a group that is being genocided and my support for a group that is under such strict duress would be conditional on the fact that nobody is ever killed, especially when we are considering that they are protesting a literal genocide. And the thing is that Hutch even agrees with that, considering that, you know, he's on the side of the American Revolution. That feels like that revolution was far less incremental and necessary than people undergoing starvation. So in a perfect world, obviously, I would not want anyone to be held hostage ever, or anybody to be killed ever, especially not civilians. But when we are talking about the only current movement that has been effective in harming Israel in the slightest and putting any kind of pressure on them, my support is by no means faltered, because it was not the perfect resistance movement with 0 casualties. You may be saying like, oh, Pigeon, I disagree with you. And honestly, if that's consistently your viewpoint, right, you're a full-on pacifist and you never support any movement that has ever negatively affected or killed or harmed civilians, then I think me and you just have an innate disagreement. Because at that point, you're saying that you are against the people that uprose against the Holocaust, people that uprose during the Civil Rights Movement, people that uprose under slavery with the Nat Turner revolts. I would never in a million years be like, you know what? My opinion on whether or not slavery is okay has been slightly shifted by the fact that Nat Turner did a revolt that didn't just target only slave owners. And I would assume that most of you would agree. I mean, I think I'd be hard-pressed to find any of you guys that are like, yeah, if I was alive during that time, I would totally criticize slave uprisings. It's like, that's just fucking insane. And if Israel is seen by the general public as the genociding, warmongering, imperialist country that they are, then I would find it very hard to believe that many Western sources would object to the overall actions that have been done in the Red Sea. The second thing I want to clarify is I said that the ships have to do directly with Israel or indirectly, but I think I didn't clarify what I mean by indirectly. I think by stopping all commerce in the Red Sea, it puts pressure on Israel from the other countries that are being affected also by that same blockade. So if you're thinking, Pigeon, no man, they're not all having to do with Israel. In my head, they are. If you stop a ship that is doing commerce in the area or through the area, and the demands are just like, hey, stop doing a genocide and we'll let you through, then the other countries are going to put pressure on the country doing a genocide. Because unfortunately, money talks more than fucking human lives. It's disgusting, I know. All right, back to the video, I think. Here's what Hutch has to say about that.
He's saying they've all tried caught, including the captain of the ship that he went on. He's saying that the vibes are immaculate.
Yeah, imagine hijacking a ship at gunpoint and then forcing the people that are working on that ship to do drugs with you. Like, it's pretty dark when you think about it. It's not like a happy story. That's dark, you know? Imagine violently holding someone hostage under threat of like extreme physical harm or death and then forcing them to do drugs with you. I would have been so fundamentally unwell if somebody came into my home in a gunpoint, forced me to do drugs with them. I would be so compromised. I would have such a horrible panic attack.
If they came into your home, what the fuck are you talking about, Hutch? These are ships that are trying to transport shit to Israel and also trying to transport shit through the Red Sea in the middle of a genocide. This is not just a dude sitting on his couch. It's not like the blockade was fucking hidden. What do you think a blockade is supposed to do? Are they supposed to just let people through? Well, maybe you're thinking, all right, maybe he just doesn't like the Houthis because of their... maybe you're just thinking he doesn't like the Houthis, so he doesn't trust the blockade. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Here's what he has to say about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Directly fought the Nazis. This is like saying Anne Frank should have raided Chinese vessels going to Portugal. It makes no sense. Taking Filipino crews hostage, I would not support.
They always invoke the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising when talking about like October 7th. And I looked into the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and I found no instances of Jewish Poles attacking like families, like innocent, like, you know, unarmed families. That wasn't a thing. They were going after German forces.
So you think that the Jews going against a Nazi regime, an authoritarian state, that you would not support them if they killed a single civilian? Hutch, you were so hell-bent on defending Israel that you were at a point where you were saying that your support for the Jewish resistance within Nazi Germany is conditional. This is the guy that is supposed to be a progressive. How the fuck do you think the Holocaust ended, Hutch? People didn't just walk around with funny signs and dance. Jesus Christ, you numbskull. Anyways, guys, let's get back to Gaza. Quickly, what do you think Zionist means? The most vague way to put it, as the person he's reacting to that he doesn't correct, is that Zionism is the belief that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. Now that seems pretty harmless, right? I'd say if you were against apartheid, genocide, etc., you might want to rethink that position. There's part of that definition that's burying the lead a little bit. Zionism isn't the belief that a country has the right to be named Israel and it has the right to exist as a state. Rather, it is the belief that Israel has a right to exist as an ethnically homogenous and nationalist state for Jewish people. By being vague, the definition can seem kind of harmless, but believing that any state has the right to exist as ethnic exclusionary is inherently an authoritarian and far-right belief. So how do you guys think Hutch defines Zionism?
There's some people that don't have favorable views of Benny Morris in the chat, but he definitely gets into the perspective of Arab people at the time. Like, he doesn't just doesn't shy away from talking about atrocities that were suffered by Arabs that were living in British Mandate at the time.
But Israel existing, Zionism does for most.
I mean, he is a Zionist in the traditional definition of the word, so he thinks that Israel has a right to exist, and so there's that. But yeah, he doesn't shy away from talking about like atrocities committed by Israeli militia at the time, and yeah.
Oh, thank you, Hutch. Benny Morris, the guy who he's talking about in the clip, believes Israel should exist. There's no other baggage attached to that. Zionism just thinks that a country is allowed to be called Israel. Thank you, Hutch. You're so smart. God, it's like I'm talking to a 5-year-old. Thankfully, Hutch does not spread his lack of nuance on Palestine and Israel much in his uploaded videos on YouTube. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop him from speaking on Twitter a lot. Here's him defending Israel bombing hospitals. The idea that there should be zero exceptions for buildings that enjoy protections from military strikes is such baby-brained bullshit. That's why international law specifies when such buildings lose protections. These people do nothing but meaningless moral grandstanding. Otherwise, Denims is saying that America could move all of our military infrastructure into hospitals, literally nuke Canada and Mexico, and in that hypothetical, it would be illegal for either country to respond. That's exactly what she's saying. It's so fucking stupid, LOL. This logic also means you can be mobile, walk into a war handcuffed to a doctor, and go absolutely nuts. Nobody is allowed to shoot back at you according to Denim's moral code. Carry a nurse on your back like Death Stranding and walk into an enemy camp, they can't do nothing. Thank you, Hutch. Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. Saying that Israel shouldn't be bombing hospitals, retroactively lying about Hamas activity in those hospitals, and then killing a shit ton of civilians is exactly the same as saying you're allowed to walk into a war zone with a doctor tied to you and kill a bunch of people. See, this is the guy that is supposedly a hater of fascistic government. This is what I was getting at earlier. Hutch is not a man that actually is on the side of resistance. He just is vaguely with the cause. You can go to his Twitter and find dozens and dozens of tweets of him talking about Hamas is bad and the ways that Palestine fights Israel and the way people fight Israel is wrong. But the only times this man is ever speaking up about the disgusting ethnic cleansing that Israel is perpetrating is whenever people are like, hey man, why is it you only ever speak about Palestine in the context of how they shouldn't be attacking Israel? He's not okay with Israel's actions, but only so far as the very current extent to what they're doing. If the violence and killing of civilians was slightly turned down, he may not even criticize them at all. Because Hutch is not actually against the killing of civilians. He is not an advocate for pragmatic decisions within a resistance movement. Hell, he doesn't even care when he uses the words of Nelson Mandela and MLK to defend Israel as an ethno-supremacist state. Because he is not a progressive. He does not want change, not even incremental. He is simply a guy that likes the color blue more than he likes the color red. Hutch is not on your side. He simply wants to shake his head while your country is absolutely leveled and your children are starved to death. And God forbid you throw a Molotov back at the people directly starving your child. Or he may just claim there was never a starving child to begin with. Fuck you, Hutch. Thanks for watching. Unscripted outro time. Sorry this video took a little bit while to put out. I've been very busy with work and I've been so tired, guys. I gotta be honest, I'm tired. That's so wrong. Can I be sleepy for once in my life? If you like this video, I recommend that you follow me somewhere on my socials. They're somewhere on the screen right now. I'm most active on Twitter, but I will be more active on other places if I get more followers, so follow me there if you want. Links are in the description, or you can just type it in like a grandpa. If you're thinking this video was a bit more mean-spirited than my usual content, you're right. I really do not like Hutch. I do not like him at all. I think he is almost on the level of like a Destiny-esque figure. Like just a vile creature. I'm not talking about Destiny's personal shit, obviously. The horrible shit Destiny has done in his personal life, I don't think Hutch is on that level, obviously. I'm just saying, politically speaking, both of them are very fucking stupid, and I hate them. But if you like this video and you want more, frickin' subscribe, man. Hit that dang like button, you know? I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, the big 1K. So that would be awesome. You know, maybe even leave a comment. See what your favorite Pokemon is or something. Actually, no, you could do. You could ask me a question. Maybe I'll respond to it in the next video. You know, maybe I'll say what my favorite Pokemon is. My favorite Pokemon is Rio Nyclus. Big jelly guy. I love him. I've been watching a lot of competitive Pokemon. Sorry. I've also been listening to the new Clips album. Awesome. I love Pusha T.
And Pussy too.
Yeah. Anyways, that's it for now. I'm still planning on generally releasing a video once a month, and I've somewhat stuck to that timetable. This is not my main source of income, nor is it a source of income at all, so I can't make it a priority right now, which I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. It's a passion project. Just like, obviously, I have other responsibilities first. Yeah, so plenty of my sources are going to be in the description if you are interested in reading up more about anything. There are also plenty of other creators that have gone over the genocide within Palestine right now, if you are interested in looking more into that. And yeah, I think that's it. So like and subscribe if you like this video, or if you didn't like this video, watch another one of my videos. Maybe you'll like that one. Follow me on my other socials, and I'll see you next time when I shave my head, and then in 3 months, a little flower grows out. And you guys all call me handsome because you like the flower and me. Alright, so could happen, you don't know. Alright, bye.
I'm going to fly for you. I hate my nose.